I asked a coach who coached at multiple places, will you live here when you're done? His response, you know how it is. It depends on how it ends. It's so true. I've watched so many people give their best energy to an institution, then it ends, then they never want to wear that logo again. Back in 2014, Becky Burleigh and I started a monthly coach collaboration with all the head coaches at the University of Florida. They would idea share around topics that nobody talks about in coaching. That's what this episode will feel like. It's a conversation with two Hall of Famers from the University of Florida, Mary Wise, former volleyball coach, and Becky Burleigh, former soccer coach. They tell you what nobody tells you about endings in coaching. Becky, I'm going to actually start with you because you and I this past weekend helped a coach transition out as they tried to get ahead of the game with their resignation because there was a good chance that they would not be retained. What was the best lesson you learned from that?
Whew, the best lesson I think I learned was getting ahead of it is a really smart play because for a number of reasons, but most importantly for me, because of the personal reason of having an opportunity to say what you want to say, thank the people you want to thank, and have that moment prior to just being let go. And also have good feelings about the place after you're done.
Mary, you've seen a lot of coaches in your tenure where they get fired or they move on, and then there's a bitter ending and they don't feel comfortable going back to a place they invested so much of their time in. How do you think about that?
Um, I think, Brett, it goes back to that piece that we have discussed before is that in coaching, to be successful coaching, you have to have a relationship oriented view in working with your athletes. It has to be relationship first. But that it's a business. And so and if you coach as if it's a business, you're gonna f it I don't know how it works if you do that, but yet to have that you have to keep in the back of your mind, end of the day, people are getting hired and fired for business reasons, and so they're juxtaposed, and how do you manage both? I don't think I was great at that, and
Why?
so, because I did not use there are things that would have helped the program if I had been more transactional in certain conversations. I had great administrators, I had wonderful relationships with them, but I needed to be much more intentional in terms of the of how I could leverage certain transactions to better the program.
Okay, so you stepped down, you're 2 weeks from being removed from this.
Mhm.
How long did you know before you told anyone?
Oh, well, the $1,000,000 question that I have been asked, and I I had a real hard time. I kept saying, "I can't stop Father Time." I knew that everything has an expiration date, so does coaching, and that eventually I knew was going to have to step down, but I couldn't personally see how I could have one foot out of the door and still be successful. So I stayed right here, right. I'm coaching, I'm here, I'm in it. I cannot think about what happens next and the exit plan until I got Becky's advice how to have an exit plan. But it wasn't I got till we were starting the spring recruiting, and then I knew, "Okay, do I have it in me to go another year?" And I knew that wasn't fair to the athletes, so that's how I knew it was time.
When did you ask yourself for the first time, is it about time?
I didn't ask myself very often, or if that question was if I was, I wouldn't allow myself to answer because I just had this I couldn't I got it I have to be all in. I cannot do this. I can't start thinking about is it time, when it's time. And so it was it was in the back of my head and then I would just let it go. Like I put it in a drawer and then went to work.
Becky, you've experienced it. You've helped coaches transition out. What have you learned about that process? What are the things that people don't tell you and then it's like, whoa, this sneaks up on you.
I'd say the number one thing is that you have so many constituencies as a coach, whether that's your alumni, your current team, the parents of your players. You could keep going, make that list so long. And when you make an announcement like that, like your experiences, or if like you're Mary, I've been here 37 years, or in my case, 27 years at Florida. Like this is a moment, and their experiences. How is this going to impact me? And when you are thinking one way and people are thinking the other way, there could be some mixed feelings around reactions. But if you think like they might think, you sort of prepare yourself for that.
What was the most difficult reaction you had to deal with?
Recruits. We actually had a player commit to me about a week before I had decided. And honestly, I had decided and had not announced. And she called on the phone and she was so excited. You know, the night that a kid commits to your program is like a big celebration in their household. It's accumulation of like all of this process that they've gone through. So she calls and she's like, I want to be a Gator. And I'm like, yes. And then I hung up the phone and I'm like, I cannot fucking do this anymore. Like I literally thought that. And I'm not a swearer, as you guys on this class know, but that was what went through my head because I felt like a fraud.
Mary, your reaction?
Oh, I like my stomach just went into knots when Becky retold that story. And I think back on one of the players that we were able to get out of the portal, and the night after I told the team, she came in the office and she asked, "Why did you bring me here if you were gonna leave?" And oh man, that was a tough one, and I still feel bad. I mean, I told her when I was doing that, I didn't know. You know, that was in December, and I didn't know. I thought I had another year in me, and I knew how good we thought the team was gonna be. And that's why I thought leaving it in really good shape. But as Becky describes that, um, that you, or even but even 4 years prior to that, when you're recruiting players, they think you recruit them that you're going to be there that entire time, and there's no guarantee whether you're retiring or get fired or you get a better job and a different job that's better for your family and you move away. So there are no guarantees, but that's not how you recruit. You recruit like you are going to be with her or him throughout their career. Now they may or not be with you because of the portal, but that's exactly how you have to recruit. So I'm now I'm gonna have to like slow the heart rate down after listening to Becky's story.
Well, go back to that moment where you've just completed that conversation. You're walking out of the office. You get in your car, you're driving home. What are you thinking on your way home?
The giving the dealer car keys back, and I have no computer, I have no car, I've got no I was I was like I had such angst getting to that point. And it took some time for me just to slow down. The best thing I did just on a personal side is I left town and went and spent time with grandkids, and they don't care. They don't care what you did. You're not, certainly not a volleyball coach in their eyes. That was really good for me. But at that time I know players are resilient. No program, no one person is bigger than the program. We're all replaceable, and I know that. I know that. I upended, as Becky said, in one of the many pieces of advice that I sought out Becky more than once, is the advice when she just talked about earlier, is that be prepared that everyone you tell will look at it in terms of how it affects them. That is so true. And many a Becky truisms. And just so I don't forget to say this, as I was going through the process, I told Becky I needed a bracelet that said, "What would Becky do?" And because her advice was so good through that. And just know that nothing lasts forever. Leave it as good a shape as you can, and then step away, because I don't want the players need to be I had to be all in. The players need to be all in with the next coaching staff as well.
All right, Becky, let's get real for a second because there were players that were calling you
Absolutely.
to get to help heal what was happening because your program went backwards fast with the new regime and you're trying to console them. When you're hanging up the phone, what are you thinking?
You know, I really tried to keep in my mind that every conversation I'm having, because I want to discourage the conversations. I mean, I brought those kids there, so I felt some responsibility, but I wanted to feel like every conversation I was having, I could have in front of the new coaches and not feel like I was being disloyal.
Mary, your thoughts on what Becky's saying?
Thus the bracelet. Be what would Becky do? I think it was great advice. I have not, uh, I've only seen the players as a group, once since the announcement, and funny enough, it was, they invited me to, their Super Bowl party, my husband and I said, "Oh, you guys, what are you gonna do when we show up?" And we did show up, and they were great. One by one, gave me a hug, and they've been so wonderful. But that's my last conversation with them, and but I go back and forth. I don't want them to think that I'm walking away and I don't care about them, because that's not true, but it's not my place. It would be inappropriate, following Becky's lead, for me to insert myself, knowing that, with change is, it brings about some angst. But as soon as the players get into the volleyball and then they're back in the gym, I know I knew they would be fine, as I trust they are right now.
I think the hardest thing is not necessarily interfering with the new regime. I think it's more just like I just remember this very poignant moment I had when I was actually walking out to my car and there was this giant dumpster and there's some stuff leaned up against the dumpster and I'm like, "Oh, that looks familiar." And I walk over and it's like, some of the historic like pictures and things like that. And I don't know why that hit me like hard, but I was just like, okay, they cannot save every piece of memorabilia from Gator soccer. But if something about it like leading up against the dumpster, I was just like, whoa, I guess it's time to move on.
Oh, I love it. It's so true. What I told Becky, that the time between retirement and irrelevance is like a nanosecond. Like how fast we have to in athletics, you move on. I had we had a pile of old plaques and trophies, and I called around town in Gainesville to say, where could we take them? Because I didn't want them going in the dumpster, only because for environmental reasons. And there's actually a place that will take them. I left before the plan was we were going to get a truck, because there was just so much stuff. And so, I left the office completely bare. I didn't want anyone to feel responsible for, what do you do with it? You dump it, you move on. I wanted to send that message.
There's so much symbolism with that. When you think about it, have you been able to find peace with the transition yet?
I think, it's still a work in progress, but I am enjoying that. I didn't realize you could live without the feeling of worry of what's next, 'cause that's all I've had for decades. Becky Rowland, our former women's tennis coach, reached out to me yesterday and asked how I was doing, and, that was my message back to my I didn't know you could exist without feeling anxious about what's next, because it's been so long, and that piece has not been hard. It's been like, I don't even think I let go on vacation. I mean, Becky, if I asked you the true serum, when did you really completely let go, even on vacation? How good were you at doing that? Because I was awful at it.
So bad that it wasn't until UF instituted the idea of like the sabbatical, the 2 week sabbatical, that I had even taken a 2 week time period where I had that much time off. So I was pretty bad.
Yeah, me too. And on vacation, I was still addicted to the phone. And if I heard a text, I'd get that angst like, okay, don't be bad news. Just don't be, or what's next, or what do I have to like, who needs my attention right now? And I was just with family this past weekend in Tampa, and my sister said she's never seen me, one, seem so relaxed, and two, so disengaged from the phone. That no one tells you that how good that's gonna feel from coaching.
Mary, when she says that, how do you take that comment?
A little bit of like, it's a good thing I walked away now. If and my husband said that I've been in a perpetual state of a worry face. And then he made fun of the worry face. And I was like, "Yeah, I think I was." You're just because you can never do enough. You're always recruiting the next class. You're always like this piece. And I don't deny that the social media, we can read up and we know what it's doing to 16-year-old girls. And that's why I've disengaged with it, because I felt like I was enabling. If I was part of it, I think we're doing so much, but for another podcast, but it would call, and I thought, I'm 65, and if watching social media, this player making this visit to this school, and what this program has when they are showing off their new facilities, and if it gave me that kind of reaction, what does it do to young girls? So that was my piece, and it was wearing on me, because you have to pay attention and all, and so when my sister said that, I thought, wow, I love the job. I don't want to talk disparagingly about coaching. The relationships, the wonderful experiences.
Becky, your thoughts?
I think what Mary's saying is so true. I remember our academic advisor retired around the same time I did. And he went into a position, so he didn't retire fully. He retired from athletic academic advising. And I asked him, what is something that you thought was normal then and you realize now isn't? And it's very similar to what Mary's saying. It's like sleeping with my phone near my bed because I'm going to get a text at midnight and I'm going to have to deal with it. Understanding that a recruit might come in at 1 o'clock that no one was expecting and they're going to expect me to be there to talk to this person. Like, it's just so much of the stuff that it doesn't even phase you when you're in it because it's just all you know. But then when you're out of it, you're like, what the hell was I doing? Like, that was not normal.
It's so real. And Becky, one of the things that you have wrestled with is, does the institution like me because I'm compliant? And if I wasn't fully compliant, would there be the same feeling?
Yeah, that's true because, I think this is my perception that I'm relatively easy to get along with in the work setting. But is that because like Mary spoke about at the very beginning of this, was not somebody who was super transactional. If I got a no, I might push a little bit, but then once the no was the no, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to figure out a way to do this on my own. And so my relationship stayed intact because of that. But would they have had they been more transactional?
Why do you think that created inner with you?
Because I think you want to be authentic, and that is authentically me. I'm resourceful and I'm not gonna push back on things. So you want to be that authentic person, but you want people to like you because you're authentic, not because you're easy to get along with.
Mary.
For the record, yes, Becky just described herself exactly what it was like working with her, and one of her superpowers was sharing, like she's doing right now, and walking down the hallway and sharing. But the that conflict of, your program isn't going to advance if you aren't making the asks. If you are, and would we have been better off if I had interviewed for more jobs? Would Florida volleyball be better off if I had left a decade ago when I had a chance? There are some things that we'll never know, but you don't, I don't know. It doesn't come with a playbook. How do you manage both? Because I'll go back to that, because if if this, Mary, works with bringing the program forward in the ask with the administration, I don't think that works in the room with the players.
So much there, Mary, because I think about you and have thought about you a ton the past couple of years, believe it or not. And especially when you see the transfer portal, because one of the things that the transfer portal does not do a good job of is the collectives don't reward loyalty. When players go to the portal, it's just them getting their market value increased. And so when you see these young coaches get these jobs and their salaries are way higher just because of where the market is. And then you have done all these things, you've remained loyal, you've continued to build and advance, and there's this massive gap. Man, I just like to know, how do you think about that?
For so long, I thought, if as long as we run a successful program, we win, we do it the right way, the players are well taken care of, I'll be rewarded. Those things will take care of themselves. And I didn't push for them. I didn't ask for them. And then one day woke up when only because a friend sent me some salaries that I was not aware of. And I went, oh,
Becky?
Mary's point about does the program advance? I don't even think that's a question. Does the program advance if you have more coaches in the mix? So Mary was 37 years. Like, let's just say every 7 years there's a new coach there. Like, the program is going to advance. It has to, because it has to keep up with the market. And so you kind of have this feeling that loyalty should be rewarded, but at the same time, it's almost unrewarded because things don't advance. So if you're not advancing, you're going backwards basically in our world. And so I think that is the biggest challenge with, should you have a shelf life at a place? It's hard for me, or maybe Mary, I don't want to speak for her, to say that, because like, I've loved being in the same community for as long as I did and being in one place and having this exceptional community of alumni and things like that. But man, there are some incentives to not be like that for sure.
And this is really the mechanics of the profession, and the people that are living this can relate to this so much. And so, Mary, I'd like your perspective on Becky's situation, because Becky built quite a resume of Florida. And then when she steps down, there is a facility investment. The person that's coming in does not have a resume yet, really. And the compensation is 25% higher than Becky's last year, despite the body of work. How do you process all of that?
we watched it in real time, and it was hard because I saw how hard Becky worked, how invested she was in just as Becky said, not just the program, but the department, the community, and then watching the hardest part. I didn't even know how she recruited with the facilities that they were playing with, but you see it so often. Maybe we just become accustomed to it, like, there's no question that, and Becky, you can appreciate this. I'm guessing right now the Lemoran lobby is getting a makeover. And but it's just the reality of it. Becky is such a positive person, and again, since I wear the Becky band, it's like you can see it half full or half empty. If I stayed in that, I didn't want to be that bitter old coach. That was something really important to me. So I had a Post-it that said gratitude, and I had it on my board. But how do you fight for the advancement of your program, but still display live feel with the core value of gratitude? You see how they shouldn't be in conflict, but sometimes I felt they were.
It's so real. And when you have the post-it note of gratitude just over to the side, what do you think the most common circumstance that where you were experiencing that caused you to look over there and remind yourself?
It was when I got asked, "Are you happy here?" Because I was trying to advance the program, and I saw there was a time not that long ago where we were watching investments in women's volleyball around the country, and thus where women's volleyball is around the country, and TV exposure and attendance and all. And I knew if we don't stay ahead, we're going to fall back. And We were ahead of everybody in the 90s. I know before any of these people listening were born. We were ahead of everyone else in the league. But then slowly, when we were just making these little tiny steps and these other programs were taking bigger and bigger steps. And so the question was asked to me, are you happy here? And I thought, are you happy I'm here? Like, I was like, and that I know I've said this multiple times, but truly, I wasn't great at advancing the the program without showing gratitude. I didn't want to be that complainer coach. I didn't want to be that. But yet just winning wasn't enough. So Brett, you should have had a podcast about a decade ago that I could have learned these skills. How do you advance your program without being seen as the whiner, complainer, never enough person?
And on top of that, because you weren't that. And so behaviorally, you're in line and you're doing things in a really good way. But the question is the inner experience. How do you not let resentment build when you know that you set the standard that everyone's using now as a baseline? And if you go somewhere else, you would go from here to here just because the reason they would be bringing you in is for the exact same reason they would invest in the program.
Yeah, I think maybe this, it's true in athletics, but in all parts of life is that you can, obsess about the what ifs or what you don't have. And I just think I didn't want to be that bitter. I couldn't. It's not me. It's not my personality to be in and stay in that mode. So you asked, how did you think about that or respond to that? I left at that tunnel vision. I can't let those things influence me.
Becky, your thoughts?
I think Mary's really right about the secret to unhappiness is focusing on what you don't have versus what you do, and nobody wants to be around an unhappy coach. I mean, we get there sometimes by accident, and so if we can prevent ourselves from going there, that's a good feat.
There's a great line from an athletic director that if you want to spin our football coach out, just get the football coach down the road to post something crazy and he'll lose a whole day of productivity. Mary, what do you think about that?
Oh, 100%. There's no question we're doing that, and that and what was also on my board, comparison is the thief of joy. And social media is all about comparison. That's all it is. Putting this stuff out so that we will look at it and compare ourselves. And you can't, and I just, even with the staff, I asked, like, they would send me screenshots and I would not look at it. Cannot look. I can't go, I can't give it oxygen. Is it because you can obsess with it and lose a full day or two?
That's the benefit of having a head coach collaboration. Coaches sharing with one another about what actually happens and what you should and should not give oxygen to. So, here are a few reflections we'll leave you with. One, you've worked 2 decades at a place, you've poured your heart and soul into it. You see memorabilia in the trash can after the new regime has taken over as you walk by after being asked to visit them. What symbolism would you draw from that personally? Two, fast forward to your 55-year-old self. Imagine a family member saying to you, I've never seen you so detached from your phone. Then your partner adding to the conversation, you've lived with a perpetual worry face. What would you think to yourself if that was said to you about you that night right before you went to bed? Three, imagine witnessing a coach who played for that school and then coached at that school take all of their gear that they've received over the years with the school logo on it to a local Goodwill. What would be going through your mind as you watch that scene? And lastly, I'd like to leave you with a challenge. Talk to someone who is retired from coaching and ask them what was something that you thought was normal only to find out that it wasn't after you retired. Thanks for listening.